Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Okay. Hello, welcome to Afrospace with me, Adetunji Omotola, and my co-host, Nyasha Grace. Afrospace is a platform that brings you news and views around the African continent that relates to business, politics, lifestyle, and culture. Joining us today on Afrospace is Dr. Precious Serero, who is from Botswana. Dr. Precious is a medical practitioner who is also into the wellness business, which is set up a few months ago in Gaborone in the Central Business District. And she focuses on wellness for businesses as well as government and other institutions. She also does primary health care for individuals. Welcome to Afrospace, Dr. Precious Serero.
Thank you so much, Tenji, for having me. Such an honor, a pleasure.
Very welcome.
All right, Dr. Precious. All right, so we want to find out from you firstly, becoming a medical doctor is something that a lot of people have said is almost a divine calling. And it's a decision that, I think is probably not a very easy decision. We want to know from you, how did you come to the decision of becoming a medical doctor?
Thank you so much, Nyasha, for that. Well, for me, it's actually borderline funny story, and started as young as, I think I was 9 years old when I knew that I wanted to become a doctor. And this is pretty much because I grew up with my grandmother, and she was someone who had high blood pressure and diabetes. And so by default, if it was time for her to take her medication, you'll be sent to go pick up the medication packet and just read for her, because also she couldn't see very clearly, and I think from that age, I just developed that interest in just looking after people and taking care of them. And then on the flip side also, I was a very sickly child, believe it or not. I was very familiar with the four walls of the hospital. I was in for this and that. I mean, at some point at the age of 7, I had a facial paralysis, and I remember being so curious when my doctor was explaining to my mom what was wrong. So I think it just came from that personal experience, just the passion to be able to help people. And so, yeah, that's really how I got into it. And I think also, like I'm saying, it's more a passion thing, like you just called it a calling now. I think that's really what it is, because if you're going to go into medicine for any other reason but passion, I don't really think you will last long there. Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Precious, in my introduction, I talked about the fact that you set up Phemo Clinic just about 7 months or 9 months ago. The question I want to pose to you is, given that that is something that is an entrepreneurial move on your part, as a medical doctor now set up a clinic in the wellness space, this is surely a very bold move, but how did you take the dive, and what has been the highs and lows since you started your wellness practice?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Tinja, for that question. Actually, that's a very, I like that question, because the experience has been very, very challenging, but very fulfilling at the same time. As much as I've always wanted to be a doctor, my grandmother, who's, you can tell, was my biggest inspiration growing up, was also very entrepreneurial. I remember when we were kids and we used to sell fat cakes and fresh chips, and I don't know what you call them. We call them ice pops. Like, we used to pack them in small plastics. And we used to come all the way from the north to the south, bringing mopane worms to sell. So that is where my entrepreneurial side was developed when I was growing up. So I always knew I wanted to be a doctor, but I always knew I want to be a businesswoman, but I wasn't sure which space I wanted to go into. So when I finished my degree and I started working, and I realized, you know, there's not much that is being said about wellness. We're always just pushing to treat and expensive. So you just want to bring in the wellness aspect of it, which speaks more to preventive medicine, and it's going to take us a long way as a nation. But back to me and taking the jump and how my experience has been. When you're a technical person, like when you're the hands-on person, when you look outside, you think, ah, if I do this thing, I can make money. But we then forget that there's the administration, there's marketing, there's business development. There is a whole lot of things that are involved in actually running a successful organization. So getting into that space meant I became everything. I was the marketing person, I was the customer relations, I was the admin person. So it was very interesting, you know, and also just getting out of my comfort zone and learning all these different things that go into building and networking, meeting people outside of the medical field, learning the processes that are involved in just getting things to run in a practice. I think for me, that has been one of the most interesting things. And then also speaking about the challenges, it has been my personality. I'm such an introvert and I don't like small talk. I just want to keep to myself and, you know, but being in this space, there is no room for shyness here. You just have to be out there and be bold and be sure about the story and what you're selling to the people. So really that has been one of my highlights also, just being in practice, in private practice or business. Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about
shy girls don't get the corner office.
I'm sure they don't.
All right, great. So let's talk about the elephant in the room, and that's obviously COVID-19 pandemic. Tell us from the perspective of Botswana, a lot of praise has been given to the continent in terms of how we were quick to respond to the pandemic, to the virus, and the lockdowns that most of African countries implemented really did kind of curtail the spread of the virus. In terms of Botswana, tell us about how the response was, and in your opinion, how well that the government did in the spread of the pandemic, and any lessons that Botswana can learn for future, you know, virus or outbreaks going forward.
Yeah, thank you, Nyasha. Actually, I think the government has done really well in that area. I mean, we've seen an early closure of our borders when this pandemic reached Africa. And I think at the time when our borders had closed, we did not even have a single case, if I'm not mistaken. And when the lockdown came, we probably had less than 10 cases or something like that. And for me, the lesson there, it's just that if you want to fight these things, I mean, situations like these, you want to be proactive, you want to be 10 steps ahead of them. You don't want to play catch up with these kind of things. And also even just how the lockdown gives us room and time to prepare and get our resources and mobilize and just be ready on all fronts. And I mean, we're also very aware of the economic burden or challenges that are posed by these lockdowns. It means there's no economic activity going on. And we know in Africa, the majority of the people that are working, it's micro or small scale, and they depend on daily income from selling fruits and veggies or things on the streets and just like that. And I mean, we've seen the government make efforts to really reach these people. One of the things we know, we had food parcels that were being given out during the lockdown period. And there was a 3-month stimulus from the government for small businesses just to help them stay afloat and not retrench people. Also, at the time that the state of emergency was declared, the president did mention that no one was allowed to retrench in that period. So that was very that was something to really commend them on. And health-wise, I really think even the messages were very clear. The messages were also communicated in vernacular so that people can understand from all walks of life. And even just the demonstration, the community education that was just going around with regards to COVID, I really think that was something to really commend the government on. I mean, even when we started reopening and just easing down with the lockdowns, the restrictions that were put in place that were going to enable us to do proper contact tracing, that was also quite amazing that we had. I mean, also even as a nation, I should give it up to Botswana, because I think we're one of the most compliant nation, if I can use that word, to say we really stuck to the protocols that were put in place. We were very cooperative with the law enforcement, with the government officials that were out here working. So I really think from that angle, it's a big ups for the government and the COVID-19 task force team.
Okay. Look, interesting story you said about your president saying no one should retrench. That's very good because, you know, in a country, I don't know what the unemployment rate is in Botswana, but, you know, that's very encouraging because it's been tough, you know, for people to be able to maintain their businesses, but also to balance. Some people had to pay 50% and all of that. Look, you're a doctor. You are in the wellness business. You're giving holistic medicine to your customers or your patients rather. Now, for you, I mean, I know your country is very beautiful. You have Mahone, you have Francistown, you have all these beautiful places, Pakalani. How do you distress? What do you do to relax as a doctor when you're away from seeing people? You know, what do you do?
Wow, myself, so that had been really, really nice. I think if you just get on the golf course and see that greenery and the holes and all of that, you almost immediately forget that you are still in the same country that you live in or work in. That's really amazing. And I also recently picked up boxing technique. And it's really just for fitness purposes. I'm not fighting anyone.
Well, we hope, Doc. We hope that.
Yes, and I do enjoy reading. Recently, I'm trying to move away from novels and fiction. You know, I mean, so just trying to move towards leadership books because of the space that I now and the role that I now have. So I'm just trying to teach myself how to enjoy those kind of books because they're not really my cup of tea. And lastly, as you mentioned, Botswana is a very beautiful country, and with the borders being locked and being unable to leave the country, so this is an opportunity because I really do love traveling. I'm planning on going up north in 2 months' time just to explore the country. So that's just some of the things that I do. And I'm a big lover of the church. I am extremely involved there. I love community work and just getting involved.
Yeah, well, I think you're already kind of alluding to aspects of wellness in your response there in terms of how you take your, you find space and time to relax and de-stress or decompress. So talk about wellness because you are a wellness practitioner running a wellness clinic. Explain what wellness actually is, and is it really just a pursuit for the rich, or is it something that's accessible and attainable to the masses?
I like when you say, is it a pursuit for the rich or is it attainable? I think not being sick, you know, and that just focuses on the physical aspect of it. But if you really look at a human being, you realize there's more to us than just the body. You know, when you talk about wellness, it's actually a multidimensional concept that we look at. We're looking at the physical wellness, we're looking at emotional wellness, spiritual wellness, occupational wellness, environmental wellness, financial wellness, you know. And when you take all these things and look at them, when I meet with a client, for example, and I see them maybe with constant back pain, and once you start digging, then you realize the problem is not really the back pain. the problem is that someone is stressed because they've got social problems, and the social problems are because they've got financial problems, maybe because they're not managing their finances properly, then you realize if one aspect of this concept is not in equilibrium with the others, there is no way you'll be able to enjoy the full effects or benefits of the wellness. So really, and when also you think about it, also when we talk about health, wellness and health, we're just thinking about the asparagus and, you know, the celeries and all the expensive things and the juices that you squeeze from home. But if I just take you a few steps back, I'll talk about the Setswana diet that we know. It's probably one of the cheapest that you'll find, because it's the stuff that we used to get from our farms, the sorghum meals, the maize meals, and things like that. And we've got like a variety, excuse me, of legumes and vegetables and very little processed foods. And the African diet, I think the African continent is very rich in that kind of food. And that's really what speaks to how cheap it is to maintain a healthy diet. And then before the advances of transport and, you know, bicycles and stuff, we used to walk, and that's what speaks to the physical aspect of it. And so you then realize that wellness is not really a far-fetched thought. It's very easily attainable. And also, once we start making it part of our lifestyles, I think also the other thing is that every time we think about it, we're thinking about it in big chunks. Like if I think about de-stressing, I feel like maybe I need an hour in the gym, you know? I'm not thinking that 10 minutes of skipping rope will be enough for me. I'm not thinking that 10 minutes of switching out and just meditating will be good for me. I'm thinking I need to be on a retreat and go to a faraway place and all of that. But it's really small practices that we can incorporate in our everyday lives that can improve our wellness. And also even the other aspects that I had mentioned, you know, financial literacy, just investing in yourself, intellectual wellness, just reading an article on the internet that day. Those are just some of the practical ways that we can actually improve all the different concepts of wellness that we know exist.
Okay, interesting. Intellectual wellness. I've never heard that word before. So those two words brought together in the sequence. Okay, now you're a medical doctor, so we get that, right? And you have other parts of you that you talked about in terms of your spirituality, in terms of you doing sports through golf, and also you're reading now. So if you were not a doctor, what would you have been? What would you have pursued as a profession? Because you also said that you're shy and all of that. So what would you have done?
It's actually funny. I was having this conversation the other day with a friend. I think if I was not a doctor, I probably still would be a doctor. But
That's the best answer.
I'd probably still be a doctor, but I'd probably think I'd also be an athlete at the same time, and I'd probably be in the creative space, because I remember when I was growing up, I used to do the 100. I've always loved athletics. I was in the 100-meter heat for my primary school, but my grandmother really believed in education, and that everything else that is not books, it's a waste of time. And because she didn't get an opportunity to go to school and all of that, so she really made sure that we study hard, as well as my mom. And so I think that part of my development, if it was nurtured, I'd probably would have made it to the Olympics at some point in my life.
Wow. Wow.
It's amazing. 100 meters is not for ordinary folks. It's the toughest sport. I said 100 meters is not the easiest sport.
No,
it's very tough.
It's not.
Yeah, very tough. Well done. Well done.
All right.
Okay, now we know.
Sure. So in closing, Doc, I'm going to ask you, we are here in South Africa celebrating Women's Month, and that's the month of August. And just from you, tell us what women empowerment means to you, and give us an idea of the advances that women's rights and championing the advancement of women has, how far it's gone in Botswana.
Thank you so much, Nyasha. Actually, you know, when you talk about women empowerment and just what it means, I just remembered this one incident. So I was still an intern at the time. I was working in Rustenburg, and you know, a friend of mine, so I was just, this is like 2 a.m. now in casualty, and we're all tired and everything. And that's usually like the most difficult time of the night when you're on call. That between 2 and 4 a.m. is like the worst, because you don't know if you're awake or asleep or what's going on in your body. So now, so now I just say to my friends, I'm like, you know, I don't think I'm gonna specialize, because really, I don't think these hours are for me. The 2 to 4 in the morning really do not work for me. And so this is a guy, and so two guys that I was working with, and they say to me, what? How can you go to medical school and say you're not going to specialize? And I said, well, because I think I'd rather have quality of life, and I just feel like this doesn't fit well with where I want to go in life. I still love medicine, I will do it, but I don't think I'll specialize. And so now they say to me, you know, this is the thing with you want to start families, then you abandon the whole profession altogether. And look now, Precious, you just wasted a space in medical school that could have been given to a boy child who would have studied and went ahead and specialized and I thought to myself, you know, this is exactly what we really need to, I don't know if fight is the right word because it sounds a bit violent, but this is really what we need to stand up against, that as a woman, I should be allowed to make decisions about my life that will not be judged based on my gender, you know, and I should not feel that I am being what's the word? I don't want to say discriminated, but almost like sidelined because I'm going to have a baby at some point. I'm going to do this. So it's almost like I'm not fit enough for this role. And I really believe that as girls or as women, we should be allowed to frame and cut our path that we want to walk in, and do so at liberty without having to feel like you are letting the team down or anything of that sort. I really believe that is very, very important. And I also, in the same vein, I'm not saying we should be given opportunities because we are girls. I really believe in merit, and I think a lot of the women that I know are very hardworking. Some of the smartest brains I've ever come across in my life, and they work their way to get where they are. A very sad realization also that came to me as I was just growing up was that I don't know how people are able to link your looks to how well you're doing at school. It's like, she's doing well because she's a girl and she's pretty. And I'm thinking, but they don't talk about beauty in the exam. You don't pass exams based on how you look. You pass exams based on we can, and it's not because we are favored or anything if we do well and if we go up the ladder. It's because we can prove, we can produce the results the same way that our counterparts can. And I think we just need to be given that liberty to be who we are, and just our, I don't know if I should say our diversity, and just how different we are from our male counterparts, that also has to be embraced in so many different ways. And so we've seen in this country, in Botswana, I mean, a few years ago, we had a program which was mainly the grants to women-based, to women-owned organizations or companies, just to help them to almost catch up and close that bridge. So that was the one thing. And then also, we're also seeing now, it's almost like I don't want to say you have an upper hand, but just to make it easier for young females that are getting into government. So if you're a young person and you're female and you're of this country, you're also given some form of support to just get you on your feet and just get going. So I really think it's an appropriate topic for today. You know, I mean, also looking at this gender-based violence that's going around, and we do understand that gender-based violence doesn't just speak to women, it goes for men, but these are topics that can help. And I really believe these are conversations we want to start having with the young kids, you know, because if you look at the things they say to each other, because they learn from us, so we can teach them how to grow and be those kind of women, those kind of men that are able to coexist with each other without having to step on each other's toes unnecessarily.
Allah, that's what they say in South Africa. Allah,
Allah,
Allah.
Allah.
I love it. It's great.
Okay. All right.
So Nyasha, are you
Yeah.
there?
All right, so we've come to the end of our interview,
Okay.
Dr. Precious, and we want to thank you so much for taking the time out to come and speak to us here at Afrospace, and for us to have a moment of putting our lenses into Botswana and Gaborone and catch up with what's happening on that part of the continent, as well as obviously to also find out how you, as a woman, a female doctor, are doing in Botswana. And obviously your practice that you have also started, and understanding what wellness is and how important it is. So thank you so much for coming and educating us on that, and then informing us on what's happening in Botswana. And at Afrospace, here we like to say our goodbyes in our local languages. So I will start firstly by saying goodbye in Shona, which is my native language, and I will say Sarai Shakanaka. In isiZulu, Sala Kahle, and in Swahili, Kwaheri.
Okay.
Yes, and for me, Adetunji Amatola, Afrospace, Dr. Serero, I wish you all the best with Phemo Clinic. It's great to be interviewing you from the great city of Gaborone. 2 million people, diamonds, cattle in Lobatse, and I'll say Yoruba, Odabo, Igbo, Kachifo, Hausa, which is spoken by 29% of Nigerians, Segobe.
Okay, thank you so much, Nyasha, and thank you so much, Tenju. For me, this was such a pleasure, and all the glory just belongs to God. And I'll say goodbye in my language, which is Setswana, and it's what is spoken in our country. So we say Sala Sentle,